So I'm Laura, I'm your Vice President of Postgraduate Experience at Kent Union. I did both my undergraduate and postgraduate tour at Kent, with both my projects looking into the effects music plays on memory. So I wonder if you thought that was my ringtone or something else, but I played some music just to kind of introduce my topic. And I kind of, when I was thinking of doing this, I was wondering, whilst I played this music, even for that short amount of time, if you individually found it distracting, did you have the opportunity to process the information I was saying, or was you thinking about the song I was listening to? I wonder also if, I asked you tomorrow to recall what I said, would you remember, or would you remember the song? Obviously, I can't do that now. I've told you I would ask you, but now your brain, you're actively processing quickly both types of information. So if you did now recall tomorrow, you would be able to recall both information quite similarly. So I'm going to just give you a moment to kind of think about, like, what is your preference? Because I never got the opportunity to really think about my preference until I started studying this for like 2 years. So, do you listen to music regularly? Do you sit and listen to music while revising? Do you listen to music with or without lyrics? Do you find that music acts as a distractor, or do you think that it helps you focus your attention on your revision or any other task you may be carrying out? So just a quick overview about memory. So we all have short-term memory, working memory, and long-term memory. Some models do differ, but across literature I have read, short-term memory and working memory is widely used interchangeably. But for now, if we adopt this working model of memory, I've popped a picture on the screen. So the working model of memory suggests there are multiple components, all of which process different types of information. So the central executive at the top, which is the driving force of working memory, receives all of this information, all of the stimuli coming in, and allocates it to one of the subsystems. So there are three you can see. This is an updated version of what I'm talking about, but I want to focus on the visual spatial sketchpad and the phonological loop. So the visual spatial sketchpad stores and processes visual and spatial information, while the phonological loop stores and processes spoken and written information. Each are limited in capacity and are independent of one another. And this model makes like an important prediction that we should think about actively as we go through this presentation, which is that two tasks cannot be successfully carried out together if making use of the same component. So if we think of music and memory, this could raise the question of, if you're using the phonological loop, how could this be hindered if you're doing both revising written materials whereas listening to music with memory? So then moving on to long-term memory, it is what it says on the tin, it's long-term stored memory. So once you have rehearsed something enough or spent enough time practicing the information, your brain can then process it as a long-term memory. This movement is defined as synaptic consolidation, but we can't forget that, if you're trying to take in too much information at one time, you cannot process this working memory into a long-term memory. So a bit of the past research, as we go through this presentation, I'm going to share with you some of my undergraduate research as well as my postgraduate research, because I do look at music and memory across all of it. So what we first need to note is there is a lot of research in this area, looking at various variables, but unfortunately there is a lot of inconsistent findings, which makes it very hard to conclude anything about what this true impact of musical memory is. So researchers found that background music compared to silence has found to be beneficial on effects such as reading comprehension, second language learning, and furthermore, the musical rhythm has been found to aid in the facilitating recall of particular text. On the flip side, background music can impact performance negatively. So several studies have found that background music can impact the performance in cognitive tasks such as reading comprehension. Ironically, I just told you that there was research that stated music enhanced reading comprehension. So, this just shows some of the inconsistencies in this research. And then some of the studies have found that music negatively impacts performance, such as memory. However, there is some impeding research to suggest there is no impact, or rather that other factors could play a role in affecting performance, such as the volume, the style of music. So again, if we're not saying it negatively or positively, we're saying that there is another factor that we need to look at. So yeah, it just paints a picture of how many things could play a role in music and memory. So music with and without lyrics was my undergraduate dissertation. So I'll take you through some of the literature I was looking at. So by understanding the components that I went through with you with the working memory model, you can start to understand the functioning and how they can be disrupted by external stimuli. So if we're looking at the phonological loop again, how could music be distracting? Could this lead to us inferring that music with lyrics would negatively impact memory retention and performance across a number of tasks? Because music with lyrics would take up more space and more processing than music without lyrics. Further research has also found that there was significant negative impact of music with lyrics for those carrying out verbal memory tasks compared to those listening to music, instrumental music. So again, it's that extra information of there being lyrics. So music has been reported to have a distracting effect. I think this was the thing when I started this, I couldn't understand how people sit there and listen to music while studying. Because for me, I'd be singing, I'd be dancing, and I'd know at the end of like a 6 hour, 8 hours in the library, I've not taken anything in. So, you know, if we look at this, whilst music has been found to have these negative effects on memory retention because of this distracting effect, strong findings have been instead found for the distracting and negative effects of noisy environments. So this was the opposite to what I thought of me as an individual. I found it was easy to sit in a relatively noisy coffee shop, or I could sit in the Union Bar, busy parts of the library, and I would be fine listening to music. But whilst listening to music and studying, I did struggle with this. So this is, sorry, if you still up, are we okay?
Yeah, all good.
Oh, sorry. So this is my undergraduate dissertation, and I'll take you through some of the bits that we did and then some of the results we found. So we know that from past studies, we've investigated the effects of musical memory, but only a small number have studied the effect of country music. So with minimal research looking at any other genre other than classical music, this study therefore looks at the effects of country music on memory. Additionally, past research has also generally stated music has had an effect on memory, but it doesn't specifically state whether it was due to the lyrics or any other feature. So my research was therefore looking at the effects of lyric versus non-lyric conditions to assess the role in memory may play, in the hope that we would fill some of these gaps in the literature. So this study used a within subject design where all participants are basically exposed to all the conditions. We used 24 participants, and when we got the participants into the lab, we sat them down and got them to do a behavioural task where subjects were presented with both a photograph of an object and the word associated with it. So you'll see it just on the screen with a little walnut and the question mark. The students would have to sit there and state whether it would fit into a shoebox. So either press J or K as quickly as you could. But whilst you were carrying out this study, you would also be randomly presented with either one of three conditions: silence, country music with lyrics, or country music without lyrics. And then after this task took place, we asked the students to play a filler task. So some of you would have played it, it's the bubble shooter game, and they were intended to play this half an hour. This was basically to distract them enough so they couldn't actively think about all the words they'd just been presented with. And then after, they were presented with a blank screen, and they had to freely recall as many words as they could. And then we basically checked if they were correct, if there was any false memories, and so on. That was testing kind of the short-term memory element. And then after 24 hours, we got students to come back and once again, just freely recall. So this study found interesting results, in my opinion. I will not bore you with the statistics, and to be honest, I don't want to go through the statistics. There are so many, but I will tell you the overall theme. So in summary, the results revealed a significant main effect of the music condition on memory performance. So with silence being significantly higher than the other two conditions. So I could have expected this from how I study. I do recall most when I focus myself and have no distractions. So I did kind of expect the silence, but I expected more from the without lyrics and the with lyrics. But although you then look at the image and music with lyrics found better overall recall than music without lyrics, this wasn't a statistically significant difference. However, a very interesting finding, because I didn't think we would have better recall under the lyrics condition. So it makes me think, what else could be playing a role for that to have happened? So moving on to kind of my postgraduate research and the dissertation that I took part, we know looking at the results from that study that we found the silence was more effective than music with lyrics and without lyrics. It's made me think long and hard, and I mean a whole summer's worth of thinking, what should I do in my postgraduate research? But I did think, and there has been an abundance of research around classical music and its effectiveness. So I thought, okay, let's give that a bit of a focus. So what do we know about classical music? Like I said, there is an abundance of research telling you about all the positives, with studies finding that even a single 10 minutes of listening to Mozart had positive effects on both mood and arousal, as well as performance levels. So furthermore, Mozart was found to affect individuals on a neuronal level. So, showing these improvements in specific abilities, and this Mozart effect came up everywhere across literature. Anywhere you look for music and memory, it was always a kind of look at this amazing piece of research. And in that kind of bit of research, it kind of brought up about mood and arousal. So I kind of wanted to investigate that further. So I'm going to call him Einstein, proposed this theory of personality in 1967, stating that those who were labelled as an extrovert seek to obtain an optimal level of cognitive arousal. So I found that really interesting. So it means that they're basically going to seek for more arousing environments. So they're more likely to put themselves in a noisier area of the library. They're more likely to listen to louder music. But furthermore, that this background music could be detrimental to the cognitive performance of introverts. So they're completely the opposite. They are naturally more aroused than extroverts, and therefore they don't need to seek this cortical arousal that noisier environments would provide. So you could in turn, as a student, say, I'm an introvert. That's why I sit in the silent area. So with this research providing evidence for this theory, finding that introverts had significantly lower recall than extroverts in the pop music condition than the other introverts in the silent condition. Extroverted students also found to be more than not study in loud areas of the university library in comparison to introverts. So I found this really, really interesting, and I think for you, actively to start think about, so take the time to kind of actively think about where you would sit to study. Do you sit in a social area or a silent area? Do you ironically sit in the silent area but listen to your favourite music tracks? I found that absurd that I would go out of my way to sit in the silent area, but I'd then be listening to pop music. So how did I go about studying any of this? So with past research showing clearly the positive effects of classical music, especially with the focus around the literature on the Mozart effect, we used a pre-study questionnaire that you can see on the left of the screen, and this was a physical questionnaire. And we carried this out regardless of the positive effects of Mozart, because we didn't think the classical music would be the popular choice on a day-to-day basis. So could it be we have classical music be more popular in certain situations? So are you more likely to listen to classical music while you revise over everyday circumstances? So I ran around campus, and I literally ran around campus trying to get people to fill out this physical questionnaire. So it was an opportunity sample, and I managed to get 132 individuals to fill this out. So from running around my classes to K-Bar to begging my committee to fill it out. But what we did find, the main thing to take from this, if you look on the right, it kind of summarises everything we found. And it does show that the prime preference of music was non-classical music over classical, which I'm not surprised. And with further revision, so we got people to write at the bottom in any comment section what music they would choose to listen to. And again, unsurprisingly, pop was the popular preference. But the thing I found interesting, again, I think, which is quite normal if you think about it, is the increase in classical listeners while revising over it being their regular preference. So we then moved on to an online questionnaire. So again, one of the confounding variables could have been for the main study that students could be familiar with the music that we're playing on top of the study they were carrying out. So that could have been that you hear the music and you start singing along to it and it distracts you, or that you hear the music and it improves. So again, we don't know if it could hinder or improve that performance. But to reduce the chance of this regardless, we carried out this pre-study online questionnaire. So what I got was 192 unfamiliar songs, half classical and half pop. Once participants agreed to take part in this study, they would check whether they were a classical or pop lover, and this response led them to randomly being allocated to one of three conditions within that genre chosen. So 6 conditions overall, and this was done so the participants, didn't have to listen to 96 songs each. So 32 songs of 10-second extracts listened to, and participants would have to rate the songs on how much they enjoyed them and the familiarity. So the research had 23 participants preferring classical and 121 pop. This shows familiar rate of classical lovers as the first question. Furthermore, we can see less classical lovers in the main study. But the whole point of this was to extract 6 of the most unfamiliar songs from the main study. And on to the main study. We had 81 participants. We used the same recruitment technique as the undergraduate dissertation, apart from we also put posters across campus where we try to recruit classical lovers, just to try and balance out the amount of classical versus non-classical lovers represented in the study. The restrictions and requirements were the same as before, and the study was pretty much the same as an undergrad. They had the same behavioural task, filler task. The only difference was that they were presented with classical, pop or silence over the no lyrics condition. And at the end, same as before, they do the training section, the retention, the testing. And then when they came back for the 24-hour testing, they were then asked to fill out 3 questionnaires based on their personality. The results, to my disappointment, we found no significant difference between pop and classical. Could this be due to a much smaller number of classical lovers over pop? Maybe. This just brings into question so many other factors that could be affecting recall. It couldn't have been the familiarity of the song because we controlled for that, but instead maybe individual differences could play a role. But also we do recruit students through a RPS scheme, so the students have to carry out a certain amount of studies throughout the year. Could it be that they weren't actually actively paying attention, they weren't actively trying to remember these words? So there could be research implications for this. So this study shows that silence is most beneficial. So could we apply this to educational settings, but also in a workplace, which is contradictory of findings showing that there's productivity and efficiency increase in the presence of music. So future research should look at this impact of music on specific individual tasks. What now? I could spend the next 3 to 5 years studying each individual factor that could be affecting memory, like I tried in my master's dissertation. I tried to look at way too many things, but some of the things I would like to look at are rhythm, tempo, familiarity, volume, style of music, and personality. I think is a huge one, and a lot of the literature that I've described throughout this presentation has neglected those things, and they haven't really brought those into consideration. But unfortunately, like I said, there's no time for me to do all that, so I'll have to rely that one day we will get the conclusions that we are desperately after. I say we are desperately after, but I'm desperately after these conclusions, because I really do think that it could change the practices in the education system, workplaces. So, if you can conclude that music does improve productivity and it does improve memory recall and not decrease any other functions, then why do we not play music while your staff work? So in the workplace, to increase motivation, and past research has actually found that motivation is a huge part in performance. It's a huge factor in performance, and this therefore could lead to a decrease in staff turnover. And I feel like this should be considered in the future, because how staff and or individuals are affected by music, to allow for improvement of the workplace environment, I don't see why we wouldn't try and get an answer there. But we cannot also neglect the research that states the music negatively affects the work that is more demanding and requires more attention. So you could work places, some workplaces could use music and others not. Like I said at the start, when I revise, I can't listen to music. I can, do parts of essays listening to music and know it won't impact my performance. But when I'm really, really trying to focus on information, I shouldn't listen to music. In education, if we find the silence is best for individuals, then why do we allow ourselves, our children, our friends to listen to music? But this does bring into question the sample use. So on one hand, we have an abundance of research suggests that students need a comfortable and quiet place to study, demonstrated by the popularity of libraries overall. On the other hand, students are suggested to be more adaptive to listening to music at this stage of their education, as they are constantly exposed to new learning opportunities and new music. So do people become accustomed to listening to music? Should we be instead looking to test younger academic individuals, so those in primary school, high school, and see how they adapt under the situations? And then another nice piece of information just to leave this on is the classical music benefits memory performance for those who have Alzheimer's, showing the benefit of this genre of music on reducing symptoms and increasing memory performance. So those who have Alzheimer's were more likely to remember memories, their children. They can look at a photo and when they're listening to this classical music, more likely to remember. But I would question that, is this because the music's familiar to them and it's able to trigger that memory? And if we tested this in 50 years' time, would our generation show this also, but only when we listen to pop music? Just a few thoughts to leave you on. If you do have any questions, like Pat said, please feel free to use the Q&A section. Otherwise, there is my LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to connect, answer any questions you may have. And thank you.
Thanks so much, Laura. Really nice job. We have a few questions for you. Would you like to tackle them?
Yes.
Okay, so first question. So Gen Z kids, don't say kids, 1994 and onwards, are known to need more sensory stimulation and tend to prefer to stay busy so that they don't get bored. Is this change in generation and a new era of technology reflected in research on the distracting/enhancing effects of music? You kind of touched on it at the end, but I think that's...
Yeah. So I actually thought Gen Z was 1996 onwards, but I could be completely wrong, or 1997. I thought I missed it by a little bit. But yes, there is a lot that, more sensory stimulation, but also that they're very social media, they're very, keep themselves occupied. Whereas when I was a kid, I'm telling you now, my mum would tell you that I used to sit with little teddy bears having a picnic outside. But I don't think the research so far does reflect the difference in individual. But I think that's why a lot of research looks at students, because students are ranging. I know my research only ranged from 18-year-olds to I think maybe 32, but it does kind of reflect their listening practices. So part of my research, I didn't go into all the detail, but I asked people when they listened to music. So was it most when they were studying, when they were in the library, walking to university or to work, or in the gym? And I actually found things like the gym was the most used, like for music. And there's research suggests that if you listen to music before you go to the gym, actually motivates you and gets you ready to do what you're going to do at the gym. And then if you listen to music at the gym, it's found that it actually decreases the amount you get done at the gym. So you may be there for an hour listening to music, your productivity overall is actually less. You may be running for an hour, but you would have done better if you didn't listen to music and did weights for 20 minutes. So I think looking at I think it's going to be, you need to look at every single circumstance and, like before, the different factors with music. But I do think it is you don't want to get bored. And I'll be honest, I would sit there in the library for hours listening to music, and only a day or two before the presentation or dissertation exam would I sit there and go, oh, I can't listen to music because I now know actively I'm going to be affected. I think especially university level, you're constantly having to study and keep yourself busy and convince yourself to go to the library that, it doesn't seem so bad if you're listening to music. Don't know if that answers your question at all.
It gets there. Okay, yeah, this was actually asked just before you went on to this topic, but it is still relevant. So is the effect of music on memory significantly different between tasks and between introverts and extroverts or personality traits? Now, you said about introverts and extroverts in your presentation, but I'm going to add to it and say, what other personality traits do you think are sort of most significant in terms of the impact of the effect of music?
There are so many different personality traits we can go into, like neuroticism, openness.
What are your favourites?
Like introverts and extroverts were the ones I really wanted to focus on, and unfortunately, like, I could have bored you with literally a half-an-hour presentation on all the results from my master's one, because I did really look into all these different things. But unfortunately, we didn't find any effects. But if we go off of only past research, obviously introverts and extroverts, it's all about the biological responses they have. So introverts, we all respond completely differently to extroverts because it's this amount of arousal. So if I play music to me and Pat, and I'm an introvert and Pat is an extrovert, then he's more likely to be able to maintain this information and, be able to work through the music because he's used to having that amount of distraction, that amount of arousal, whereas I'd be there and I wouldn't be able to take anything in. In regards to other tasks, again, whether you apply to an educational setting or a work setting, I think it's going to be completely different. I think if you're working and you're responding to emails, you don't have to, dip into your memory. You don't have to really actively think of hard information. I think music wouldn't have that much of an effect. Whereas, like it's stated about research looking at all the work that you really have to pay attention. So I think it was way back when they looked at research of people in it was like industries where, I can't think of the word now, like coal miners and like in those kind of factory settings, and they have to really pay attention, and if they muck anything up, like, they're gonna not only ruin their job but they're gonna hurt themselves. So it'd be things like they can't listen to music because they don't want to be distracted at all. So I don't know the other personality traits. That could be another 5 to 10 studies just to look at it, but I don't know. Only having looked at introverts and extroverts.
Cool, thank you. So this next question, you kind of touched on at the start, but I don't think it was it wasn't brought up too much within the presentation. But is there any research on the impact of? Is there any research on the impact on memory of making up songs with lyrics that you want to remember? Instead of listening to music at the same time as studying, actively using music to help memory instead of just listening to it. So the old make up a song to learn your.
Yeah, brilliant idea. And when I was deciding that summer long, when I was deciding what to research, I did want to look at whether that would improve your memory. And there's a lot of research on songs and the fact that even things like the loop in your head when you're, when you're singing a song, but you're only singing about a line of it, and you're like, why is that line stuck in my head? And the only way you're going to get it out your head is if you listen to that song. But it is found that music with a catchy tempo, catchy rhythm, it sticks in more because, it's enjoyable as well. So I think going back to that boredom thing at the start, if you could write a song, and I'm going to use a really cheesy example, did anyone learn the Bones song from Hannah Montana? And it is the only things I know about Bones. It's because it's sang in a song, and I can learn lyrics within 20 minutes, half an hour, but I couldn't learn this presentation in a week if I tried. So I do think that there needs to be more studies on how we could interpret that, and how in turn the education system, or maybe when you're being introduced to a new job or anything, how you can turn that into you learning all the stuff you have to learn. That's a very good question. I really wish there was more research on it. So if any of you want to do, a master's or anything in psychology, please, research that.
Yeah, let's turn the entire education system into High School Musical.
I mean, the campus would be quite fun to attend to.
It would be. So Daniel has asked, I'm guessing this is some specialist psychology stuff. So do you know much about the research on perceptual capacity, and could perceptual capacity be a vital individual difference on music and performance?
No, I don't know much about the research on perceptual capacity. I have looked into like working memory capacity as like overall. So if I go back to, what am I doing? if I go back to the diagram, like that, and we look at phonological loop, the episodic buffer, and the visual spatial sketchpad, there's only so much it can hold. But there was like studies, and I think there's been a lot like BBC programs as well, like can you train yourself to, you know, have a bigger brain, store more information, and there are like brain teasers and stuff, and it's more about if you practice, you're more likely to actually learn more and store more. But capacity, working memory capacity could be different among people. So like me personally, I actually have a memory problem. So my capacity would probably be quite low, and therefore if I don't focus on one thing and then practice it and it goes to long-term memory, then it's gone. Whereas I think a lot of people are able to process things through their working memory without actively practicing, and it goes straight to their long-term memory. And then you obviously have those with people, I can't think of like the term, but the people who, you know, everything goes straight to long-term memory. So I don't know how that would come into your question about perceptual capacity, but I know that individual differences in working memory capacity really makes a huge difference, and I don't know how they could study how your working memory capacity differs to another person. So I think that's why maybe why it's been neglected.
Okay. If Daniel, if you have any follow-up on that, feel free to stick it in the questions box.
No, go away, Daniel.
The last question we have currently, I was wondering if you came across any research that specifically considered listening to music for studying working with ASD or with ADHD. If yes, did you find anything of interest?
I know I have, and I know that I literally over there on the bed have a bunch of papers on different types of individuals, different types of, like obviously the way your brain processes information. So we know in those with ASD and ADHD process things differently, and some parts of their brain may be a bit better at storing or worse at storing than the typical brain. I don't know. It's an area I would have liked to have done, as in our discussion in our dissertation you can go on to talk about the implications of research, and one of the implications would be for specific individuals with like ASD. But no, I can't think of anything, but I'm more than happy to share the resources on the event on Facebook if you're interested. Have I frozen or is Pat? Hello. Have I frozen or have you?
It's me.
Oh, okay. Yes, we can hear
cool,
you now.
Lovely. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's all the questions. Oh wait, no. Yeah, me. So thank you very much, Laura, for presenting today. Hope you all enjoyed watching the presentation. It certainly was really interesting, and I'm going to consider actually how I listen and how I research. Yeah. Only being polite. But yeah, tune in to when's our next? Who's our next presenter, Laura? When?
We have a MA student today looking at, I'm sure it's modern history. He's a current modern history master student. That's at 3 o'clock. And then tomorrow we have 2 presentations to finish off the week. And I'm pretty sure they're both PhD students from the social sciences and humanities at 1 and 3.
Cool. That sounds great. Well, make sure you tune in to those as well, guys. Thank you all for listening in today. Thank you for your questions. It was just some really interesting discussion at the end there. So
yeah, made me think.
Yeah, I bet. You did well. You handled it well.
Thanks. But thank you so much, everyone, and for Pat for stepping in to present this. Really excited to pass the job over to you in a couple of months' time. But see you later, everyone.
Thanks, buddy.
Bye.
Hello.